Don't think, old man, he said to himself. Rest gently now against the wood and think of nothing. He's working. Work as little as you can. It was getting into the afternoon, and the boat still moved slowly and steadily, but there was an added drag now from the easterly breeze, and the old man rowed gently with the small sea and the hurt of the cord across his back came to him easily and smoothly. Once in the afternoon, the line started to rise again, but the fish only continued to swim at a slightly higher level. The sun was the old man's left arm and shoulder, and on his back. The sun was on the old man's shoulder. The sun was on the old man's left arm and shoulder, and on his back, so he knew the fish had turned east of north. Now that he had seen him once, he could picture the fish swimming in the water, which his purple pectoral fins set wide as wings, and the great erect tail slicing through the dark. I wonder how much he sees at that depth, the old man thought. His eyes is huge, and a horse, which with much less eye, can see in the dark. Once I could see quite well in the dark, not in absolute dark, but almost as a cat sees. The sun and a steady movement of his fingers had uncramped his left hand now completely, and he began to shift more of the strain to it as he shrugged the muscles of his back to shift the hurt of the cord a little. If you're not tired, fish, he said out loud, you must be very strange. He felt very tired now, and he knew the night would come soon, and he tried to think of other things. He thought of the big leagues. To him, there were the Grand Ligas, as he knew that the Yankees of New York were playing the Tigers of Detroit. This is the second day now that I do not know the result of the Juegos, he thought, but I must have confidence that I must be worthy of the great Di Maggio, who does all things perfectly, even with the pain of the bone spur in his heel. What is a bone spur? He asked himself. Un espátula de hueso. We do not have them. Can it be as painful as the spur of fighting cock in one's heel? I did not think I could endure that, or the loss of the eye, or both eyes, and continue to fight with the fighting cocks do, as the fighting cocks do. Man is not much besides the great birds and beasts. Still, I would rather be the beast down there than in the darkness of the sea, unless sharks come, he said aloud. If sharks come, God pity him and me. Do you believe the great Di Maggio would stay with a fish as long as I will stay with this one? He thought. I'm sure he would. And since he is young and strong, also his father was a fisherman. But would the bone spur hurt him too much? I do not know, he said out loud. I never had a bone spur. As the sun set, he remembered to give himself more confidence the time in the tavern at Casablanca when he played the hand game with the great negro from Cienfuegos, who was the strongest man on the docks. They had gone one day and one night with their elbow and on a chalk line on the table to use their forearms straight up and their hands gripped tight. Each one was trying to force the other hands down onto the table. There was much betting, and people went in and out of the room under the kerosene lights, and he had looked at the arm and hand of the negro and at the negro's face. They changed the referees every 4 hours after the first 8 so the referees could sleep. Blood came out, forming a form under the fingernails of both his and the negro's hands, and they looked at each other in the eye, and their hands and forearms and the patrols went in and out of the room and sat on high chairs against the wall while all watched. The walls were painted bright blue and wore wood and lamps threw their shadows against them. The negro's shadow was huge and it moved on the wall, and as the breeze moved the lamps. The odds would change back and forth all night as they fed the negro rum and lightened cigarettes for him. Then the negro, after the rum, would try the tremendous effort, and once he had the old man, who was not an old man then, but was Santiago a champion, nearly 3 inches off balance. But the old man had raised his hands up to dead even then. He was sure that he had the negro, who was a fine man and a great athlete, beaten. And at daylight, when the Betros were asking it be called a draw and the referee was shaking his head, he had unleashed his effort and forced the hand of the Negro down until it rested on the wood. The match had started on a Sunday morning and ended on a Monday morning. Many of the Betros had asked for a draw since they had to go to work on the docks, loading sacks of sugar or at Havana Coal Company. Otherwise, everyone would have to wanted to go to a finish. But he had finished it anyway, and before anyone had to go to work. For a long time after that, everyone had called him the Hampion, and there had been a return match in the spring. But not much money was bet, and he had won it quite easily, since he had broken the confidence of the Negro from Centrifuges in the first match. After that, he had a few matches and then no more. He decided that he could beat anyone if he wanted badly enough, and he decided that it was bad for his right hand to go for fishing. He had tried a few practice matches with his left hand, but his left hand had always been a traitor and would not do what he called on it and he did not trust it. The sun would bake it out well, he thought. I should not cramp on me again unless it gets too cold in the night. I wonder what this night will bring. An airplane passed overhead on its course to Miami as he watched its shadow scouring up the schools of flying fish. With so much flying fish there should be dolphin, he said. He leaned back on the line to see if there was possible to gain any on his fish. But he could not, and it stayed in the hardness and water drops shivering the pursuit breaking. The boat moved ahead and slowly, and he watched the airplane until he could no longer see it. It must be very strange in an airplane, he thought. I wonder what the sea looks like from that height. They should be able to see fish well if they did not fly too high. I would like to fly very slowly at 200 fathoms high to see the fish above. In the turtle boats, I was the cross trees of the masthead, and even at that height, I saw much. The dolphin looks greener from there, and you can see their stripes and the purple spots. You can see all the schools as they swim. Why is that? All the fast-moving fish of the dark current have purple backs and usually purple strips or spots. The dolphin looks green, of course, because he is really golden. But when he comes to feed, truly hungry, purple stripes show on his sides as a marlin. Can it be angry? Or the greater speed he makes that brings them out. Just before dark, they passed the great island of Sangrado Weed, the heaven and swung in the light sea, though the ocean was making love with something under a yellow blanket. His small line was taken by a dolphin. He saw it first when it jumped in the air, true gold in the last of the sun, and bending and flapping wildly in the air, it jumped again and again in the acrobats of his fear, and he worked his way back to the stern and crouching and holding the big line with his right hand and arm. He pulled the dolphin in with his left hand, stepping on the gang line each time with his bare left foot. When the fish was at the stern, plunging and cutting from side to side in desperation, the old man leaned over the stern and lifted the bushy goldfish with its purple spots over the stern. Its jaws were working convulsively in its quick bites against the hook, and it pounded the bottom of the skiff with its long, flat body, its tail and its head, until he clubbed it across the shining golden head, until it shivered and was still. The old man unhooked the fish, rebaited the line with another sardine, and tossed it over. Then he worked his way slowly back to the boat. He washed his left hand and wiped it on his trousers. Then he shifted the heavy line from his right hand to his left hand, and washed his right hand in the sea while he watched the sun go into the ocean and the slant of the big cord. He hasn't changed at all, he said. But watching the movement of the water against the sand, he noticed there was perceptible water. That was perceptibly slower. I'll lash the two oars together across the stern, and that will slow him in the night, he said. He's good for the night, and so am I. It would be better to get the dolphin a little later to save the blood in the meat, he thought. He can do that a little later and lash the oars and make it drag at the same time. I better keep the fish quiet now and do not disturb him too much at sunset. The setting of the sun is difficult time for all fish. He let his hand dry in the air and gasped the line with it and eased himself as much as he could and allowed him to be pulled forward against the wood so that the boat took the strain as much, or more, than he did. I'm learning how to do it, he thought, this part of it anyway. Then too, remember he hasn't eaten since he took the bait, and he is huge and needs much food. I have eaten the whole bonito. Tomorrow when you eat the dolphin, he is called dorado. Perhaps I should eat some of it when I clean it. It will be harder to eat than the bonito though. But then, nothing is easy. How do you feel, fish? He said out loud. He asked out loud. I feel good and my left hand is better and I have food for a night and a day. Pull the boat, fish. He did actually feel good since, because of the pain from the cord across his back had almost passed pain and gotten into the dullness that he mistrusted. But I've had worse things than that, he thought. My hand is only cut a little, and the cramp is gone from the other. My legs are alright. Also, I have gained on him, in the question of subsistence. It was dark now, as it becomes dark quickly after the sun sets in September. He lay against the worn wood of the bow and rested all that he could. The first stars were out. He did not know the name Rigel, but he saw it and knew soon they would all be out, and he would have all his distant friends. This fish is my friend too, he said out loud. I have never seen or heard of such a fish, but I must kill him. I am glad we do not have to try to kill the stars. Imagine if each day a man must try to kill the moon. That the moon runs away. But imagine if a man each day should have to try to kill the sun. We were born lucky, he thought. Then he was sorry for the great fish that had nothing to eat, and his determination to eat him never relaxed in his sorrow for him. How many people will he feed, he thought. But are they worthy to eat him? No, of course not. There's no one worthy of eating him, from the manner of his behavior and his great dignity. I do not understand these things, he thought, but it is good that we do not have to try to kill the sun or the moon or the stars. It is enough to live on the sea and kill our true brothers. Now he thought, I must think about the drag. It has its pearls and merits. I may lose too much line that I will lose him. If he marks his effort and the drag made by the oars in place, and the boat loses all her lightness prolongs both her suffering, but it is to my safety since he has great speed that he has never yet employed. No matter what passes, must get the dolphins so he does not spoil any. Some of them to be strong. Now I will rest an hour more and feel that he is solid and steady before I move back the stern and do the work and make the decision. In the meantime, I can see how he acts, and if he shows any changes, the oar are a good trick. But if you reach the time to play for safety, he has much fish, and still I saw that the hook was in the corner of his mouth, and he has kept his mouth tight shut. The punishment of the hook is nothing. The punishment of hunger, and that he is against something that he does not comprehend, is everything. But it's best now, man, and let him work until your next duty comes. He rested for what he believed to be 2 hours. The moon did not rise now until late, and he had no way of judging the time. Nor was he really resting except comparatively. He was still bearing the pull of the fish across his shoulders, but he placed his left hand on the gunwale of the bowl and confined more and more of the resistance to the fish to the skiff itself. How simple it would be if I could make the line fast, he thought. But with one small lurch he could break it. I must cushion the fall of the line with my body, and at all times ready to grip the line with my both hands. But you have not yet slept yet. But you have not slept yet, old man, he said aloud. It is half a day and a night, and now another day that you have not slept. You must devise a way so you can sleep a little. If it's quiet and steady, if you do not sleep, you might become unclear in the head. Unclear enough in the head, he thought. Too clear, and clear as the stars that are my brothers. Still I must sleep. They sleep, and the moon and the sun sleep, and even the ocean sleeps sometimes, on certain days when there is no current and a flat calm. But remember to sleep, he thought. Make yourself do it and devise some simple and sure way about the lines. Now go back and prepare the dolphin. It is too dangerous to rig the oars as a drag if you must sleep. I could go without sleeping, he told himself, but it would be too dangerous. He started to work his way back to the stern on his hands and knees, being careful not to jerk against the fish. He may be half asleep himself, he thought, but I do not want him to rest. He must pull until he dies. Back in the stern, he turned so that his left hand held the string of the line across his shoulders and drew his knife from his sheath with his right hand. The stars were bright now, and he saw the dolphin clearly, and he pushed the blade of life into a blade of his knife into his head and drew him out from under the stern. He put one of his feet on the fish and slid him quickly from the vent-up to the tip of his lower jaw. Then he put his knife down and gutted him with his right hand, scooping him clean and pulling the grills clear. He felt the maw heavy and slippery on his hands as he slit it open. There were two flying fish inside. They were fresh and hard, and he laid them side by side and dropped the guts of the grills over the stern. They sank, leaving a trail of phosphorescence in the water. The dolphin was cold, and the leopard's gray-white now in the starlight, and the old man skinned one side of him while he held his right foot on the fish's head. Then he turned him over and skinned the other side to cut each side off from the head down to the tail. He slid the carcass overboard and looked to see if there was any swirl in the water, but there was only the light of its slow descent. He turned then and placed the two flying fish inside the two fillets of fish, and pulling his knife back in the sheath, he worked his way very slowly back to the bow. His back was bent with the weight of the line across it, and he carried the fish in his right hand. Back in the bow he laid two fillets of fish out onto the wood, with flying fish beside him. After he had settled the lines across his shoulders in a new place, and held it again with his left hand resting on the gunwale, then he leaned over the side and watched the flying fish in the water, noting the speed of the water against his hand. His hand was phosphorescent from skinning the fish, and watched the flow of the water against it. The flow was less strong, and he rubbed the side of his hand against the planking of the cliff. Particles of phosphorus floating off and drifted slowly astern. Part 24. He is tiring or he is resting, the old man said. Now let me get through the eating of this dolphin and get some rest and a little sleep. Under the stars, and with night colder all the time, he ate half of one of the dolphin fillets and one of the flying fish, gutted in which its head cut off. What an excellent fish dolphin is to be eat cooked, he said, and what a miserable fish raw. I will never go in a boat again without salt or limes. If I had brains, I would have splashed water on the boat all day and drying. It would have made salt, though, he thought. It would have made salt, he thought. But then I did not hook the dolphin until almost sunset. Still, it is a lack of preparation. But I have chewed it all well, and I am not nauseated. The sky was clouding over to the east, and when after another, the stars you knew was gone. It looked now as though he was moving into a great canyon of clouds, and the wind had dropped. There will be bad weather in 3 or 4 days, he said, but not tonight and not tomorrow. Rig now and get some sleep, old man, while the fish is calm and steady. He held the line tight in his right hand and then pushed his thigh against his right hand as he leaned all his weight against the wood of the bow. Then he passed the line a little lower on his shoulders and braced his left hand on it. My right hand can hold it as long as it's braced, he thought. If it relaxes in sleep, my hand will wake me up, and as the line goes out, it is hard on the right hand, but he is used to punishment. Even if I sleep 20 minutes or half an hour, it is good. He lay forward, cramping himself inside the line with all his body, putting his weight onto his right hand. As he was asleep, he did not dream of the lions, but instead of vast school of poor priests, and that stretched for 8 or 10 miles, and it was the time of their mating, and they would leap high into the air and return into the same hole they had made in the water when they leaped. Then he dreamed that he was in a village on his bed, and there was a northern, and he was very cold, and his right arm was asleep because his head and had rested on it instead of a pillow. After that he began to dream of the long yellow beach, and he saw the first of the lions come down onto it in the early dark, and then the other lions came, and he rested his chin on the wood of the bows where the ship lay anchored. With the evening offshore breeze that he waited to see if there would be more lions, and he was happy. The moon had been up for a long time, but he slept on, and the fish pulled steadily, and the boat moved into the tunnel of clouds. He woke up with the jerk of his right hand first coming up against his face and the line burning out through his right hand. He had no feeling of his left hand, but he ached all he could do with his right hand, and the line rushed out. Finally, his left hand found the line, and he leaned back against the line, and now it burned his back and his left hand. Uh, and his left hand was taking all of the strain and cutting badly. He looked back at the coils of the line, and they were feeding smoothly. Just then the fish jumped, making a great busting of the ocean and then a heavy fall. Then he jumped again and again, and the boat was going fast, although the line was still racing out, and the old man was raising the strain to breaking point, and raising it to breaking point again and again. He had been pulling down tight onto the bow, and his face was in cut slice of dolphin, and he could not move. This is what we waited for, he thought. So now let us take it. Make him pay for the line, he thought. Make him pay for it. He could not see the fish jumps, but only heard the breaking of the ocean and the heavy splashes as he fell. The speed of the line was cutting his hands badly, but he had always known this would happen, and he tried to sleep the cutting across of the cast parts and not let the line slip into the palm or nor cut the fingers. If the boy were here, he would wet the coils of the line. That yes, the boy were here. If the boy were here, the line went out and out, but it was slowing now, and he was making the fish earn each inch of it. Now he got his head up from the wood and stayed out of the slice of the face that his cheek had crushed. Then he was on his knees, and then he rose slowly to his feet. He was sitting the line, but more slowly at all the time. He worked back where he could feel his foot, the coils of the line that he could not see. There was plenty of line still, and now the fish had to pull the friction that all the new line through the water. Yes, he thought. And now he jumped more than a dozen times and filled the sacks along his back with air, and he cannot go down deep to die, where I cannot bring him up. He will start circling soon.